Hello from the beach in Poole in Dorset. So this is my second trip to the beach today. I came first thing this morning, had a little jog in the mist, and right now I'm feeling really privileged to be at the beach. To be living by the seaside, which was always a dream that I've had for a long time. So I just thought I'd stop and talk about my big achievement of this week. On Valentine's Day, I published my first book, How to Fall in Love, a 10-step journey to the heart. And I put that up on Amazon Kindle, and I'm now working to get the paperback ready. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what that book is about and who it's for. So my book is for anybody who is looking for a better life. How to Fall in Love, a 10-step journey to the heart. So it's for anyone who is single and who is struggling to understand why they're single and who would like to find love. It's for anyone who is willing to pause and reflect and take a look at themselves and explore what might be blocking them from love. So what obstacles they might be carrying inside that might mean that they're not finding the right person or being open to the right person or being willing to commit. It's also for people who want to fall in love with their lives, who want to create lives for themselves in which they flourish and thrive. It's for people who want to change their behaviours, so maybe they have self-sabotaging, self-harming behaviours towards themselves and they'd like to change that. And the book mixes my experience, so it's a mix of memoir and self-help and personal development. So it talks about my recovery from a whole host of self-sabotaging behaviours that began very early on in my life. My difficulty with relationship began when I was very young, for a number of reasons, but notably when my father moved out when I was around 8. So when my parents divorced and when my lovely dad, tall, handsome dad, sat me on his knee in the living room of our home in Liverpool and told me that he was moving around the corner to my gran's. And as psychotherapists will tell you, that when that happens to a child, the child's natural reaction is to believe that they've done something wrong, that there's something wrong with them, and that there's something wrong with them, they're unlovable, and so they carry that message into adult life. So one of the core beliefs I formed around the age of 8 was that to love a man deeply meant that I would get really hurt. I would be hurt. I would experience heartache. So if I loved a man deeply, the prospect was pain. So if you can imagine that was my 8-year-old experience, then that thought got lodged in the back of my mind and I carried that through adulthood. So on the one hand, I was really desperate for love. I really wanted love. I wanted to be close to a man. I wanted to recreate what I had lost in my childhood. But at the same time, whenever I got close to a man, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified of the prospect of emotional intimacy and love and what I understood would come next, which was hurt and pain. So what happened was I would do this push-pull thing, or pull-push. So I would reel them in, I would attract men, I would chase them, I would get into relationships. And as soon as I got close to them, I would decide that there was something wrong with them and that I had to leave because they weren't good enough, they weren't attractive enough, they weren't dynamic enough, ambitious enough, hardworking enough. I came up with all manner of reasons why they weren't enough. And I remember, sadly, a ex-boyfriend saying to me, "I don't think anyone will be good enough for you." So that was quite difficult to hear. But that was also because I was never good enough for me. I was never enough for me. I could never hit my own standards. And then the other thing I would do would be I would deliberately go after men who could not meet my needs or with whom there was no opportunity of emotional intimacy because, for example, they were attached to somebody else, they were married to their job, they were living on a different continent, they had active addictions to alcohol or drugs or whatever it was, or work. I couldn't get close to them. And I would deliberately choose those men because that felt really safe, that I wouldn't have to ever commit because they couldn't commit back, they couldn't love back. So that was a choice that my subconscious, that the little girl inside me chose to make to keep her safe. There were lots of other behaviours that, dysfunctional behaviours that I did throughout my late teens, 20s, 30s. I had an eating disorder, and so that detached me from my feelings. So I stayed very detached from my feelings. I didn't know what I was feeling. I couldn't connect with my intuition. I didn't know what was right for me. And also I had this extra layer of fat, which was also very convenient because I didn't like myself. I didn't love myself. I felt that I was, unlovable, too fat. So I wouldn't value myself in a relationship, so I would choose people who didn't value me. And also that extra layer of fat, or whatever you want to call it, kept people at bay. It meant that I didn't feel good enough to go out with the people who I was attracted to. So they're just a few of my relationship behaviours, and in my book I have 10 steps, and they are based on my experience of the transformational journey that I have been on over the last 13, 14 years. And that has, so many things have changed over those years. So I used to be a high-flying reporter for the global news agency Reuters. I worked in Parliament. I travelled with the Prime Minister, I travelled with Tony Blair, I travelled with Gordon Brown, I travelled with the Foreign Secretary. I went to Iraq, I went to Washington, the White House, Downing Street. And I was at the same, I did love that job for many years, but I was feeding on the adrenaline and the stress. I was binge eating all that time because I felt like an imposter. You may have heard of imposter syndrome, that feeling that we don't deserve what we have, that we don't belong. So we have to put on a mask and pretend to be something we're not. I was binging to cope with the stress of that job. And also I was craving affirmation and validation from the outside. And this achievement, the constant achievement, in a way, for a while, it made me feel better about myself, but it didn't fill the hole inside. I was chasing the love of my dad in many ways, who of course loved me, but I didn't get it. And I understood that I thought that achievement was the way to his heart. And that the more I achieved, the better job I had, the more status I achieved, then the more he would love me. And maybe in my fantasy, he would come home, he would come back. So I was craving and chasing and filling the hole inside with stuff that just didn't fit. I was looking for love in all the wrong places. So I was talking about my transformation. So over the last 13 years, I've gone from being that, workaholic, high-flying Reuters reporter. I went self-employed in 2008, which was, a risk, believing that I could earn a living from some of my skills. And it took a while, but slowly I am finding my way. And now I coach and I write. So I've just written my book and I blog and, I do things that are more aligned with my authentic self. So that is also what my book is about. If you are already in a relationship and you're not looking for that kind of love, you might be looking for freedom. You might be looking for the courage to live an authentic life. You might be looking for a way to leave your job and to do something that you've always wanted to do. Or maybe you want to take 6 months out. Maybe there's a dream that you really want to go for. So that is also what my book is about. It's about finding the courage. It's about connecting to your feelings, to your intuition, to yourself. It's about finding something else to give you courage. So that could be nature, the universe, some form of spirituality, God, whatever it is. It's about building your self-esteem from the inside. So I talk about the inner oak. So in the old days, in my early days, I was a spindly little tree on the inside. I was sway around in the wind. I was nothing solid. I wasn't deeply rooted. And what I have done over the last 13 years is I have grown deep roots. I have learned to become more grounded and more centered. I have found faith in myself. And I have grown what I call my inner oak tree. So deep roots, solid trunk, grounded, doesn't fall over. It might wobble a little bit, and it does wobble, but it doesn't fall over. It's really strong. So that's my chapter 2, is building your inner oak. I've also explored my patterns. So what I talked about at the start of this video about the relationship with my dad and how that impacted my relationships with men going forwards. So I have explored my patterns, and I have identified the patterns that were running through my relationships with men. And then I have found the courage to change them, to challenge them, to start to do things differently. It was frightening, changing habits of a lifetime. It doesn't come easy, but, if you can find the courage, then it's really worth it. And, I let go of past relationships and past loves and the fantasy of men who I had been with or maybe not been with, and that they were in my head, they were squatting in my head. So I let go of them, which is another thing I talk about in the book. And I understood what triggered me in relationships. So if you think of a trigger, like a knee-jerk reaction when you're with somebody and all of a sudden you can't bear them, you can't stand them. So, I might be totally in love with a guy one day, and the next day I can't bear the sight of him. There's something really horrible about him. I understood why I was triggered in that way. And that's, there's a whole chapter in my book about that. I also talk about making space for ourselves and for love. So sometimes I believe that we can't find the relationship we want because we don't have the relationship with ourselves that we want, and we don't have the relationship with our work that we want. Maybe we're in a job that is just not right for us, and sometimes we have to break free first in order to become the person we want to be, because only then we will meet the person with whom we want to be with. I think that is the case for some of us. So, my book is about encouraging you to take risks and to believe that if you can change your life, maybe then love will follow. And I talk about setting healthy boundaries when we go dating, also in all our relationships. So in our work relationships, healthy boundaries, which means when you say you're going to leave work because you've got a yoga class or you need to do some self-care or you need a walk on the beach, you hold that boundary and you leave work because we act in our best interests. And my final chapter is about making bold choices, which is, I believe, what I have done over the last few years. I've left London, a city I absolutely love. I was there on Monday. I love London, but I've moved to the seaside. I went for a run on the beach this morning. I'm back on the beach now. I absolutely love the seaside and the beach, and it brings me peace. It connects me to something greater than myself. It gives me courage. It gives me perspective. So whatever bold choices and risks you might need to make, I believe that if there isn't love in your life right now, I believe if we start making those choices, it will come. So that's a sort of summary of my book. It is, as I said, it's called How to Fall in Love, a 10-Step Journey to the Heart. It's not just for people who are single. It's for people who want to find the courage to live a more authentic, joyful life, and who want to take some inspiration from what I have done over the last years. It is up on Kindle. It went up on Kindle on Valentine's Day, and it is available on other devices. There's a Kindle app that you can download. On the book page, you will see it says read on other devices, and I'm working on the print version over the next few days, and I hope to have that available by March the 1st. So the print version will be gorgeous because the cover is lovely, and so if you're waiting for that, I don't blame you. So if you're interested, I'll put a link at the bottom of this video, and do share it. Please do share it with people who you think might benefit. It's a story. It's a story of being lost and then being found. It's a story of going from self-hate is a really strong word, but I think there were times when that's where I was. So from that to love, to self-love, from singleness to relationship, from fantasy to something real, from feeling trapped in my job to feeling free, to not having courage, from not having courage to finding courage. So that's the story of my book, and I would love to share it with you, and I would love you to share it with others. And yeah, I'll let you know when the paperback is available, and I'm going to wrap up now. And thank you for watching. I haven't said hello to everybody because I want to put this video up on my Amazon page, but thank you for being here, and I'll speak to you all soon. Bye.